So we're going to get started today talking about making your AutoCAD drawings look good. And I think this is an important distinction between this class and a true, like, I'm learning AutoCAD class, is that we're not going to spend tons and tons of time learning all the different commands in AutoCAD such that you're a thorough, fluent AutoCAD user, because I can't physically cover all of that in 2 weeks. It's not possible. So I do recommend taking an AutoCAD class so you're familiar with AutoCAD. And when you take that, generally the AutoCAD classes are taught from more of an engineering perspective or a technical perspective. This is how you draw. These are the tools that you use to draw. This is how you create shapes and that sort of thing, and relationships among various lines, etc. When it comes to using AutoCAD for either graphic presentations or for kind of technical drawings that are going to be presented to somebody, we start to talk about how do you make things look good. And this class is about the visual art and the graphic design of making your drawings actually look good. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about line weights and how do you make things stand out in AutoCAD. I think the easiest way of explaining this is actually to go back to the way drawings used to be done. So before the age of computers, before the age of AutoCAD, way back when, before a lot of you were born, you used to have to draw by hand. And when you drew by hand, you had to distinguish line weights in some capacity. And if you were drawing in pencil, the way that you did that is you changed what leads you used. And so like if you were taking 130 20 years ago, you would have had 4 or 5 different leads. You would have used your pointer to sharpen those to different levels, and you would have done your drafting that way on a drafting board, and you'd create your line weights and your drawings that way. Some people got really proficient at doing that. They didn't want to use pencil anymore. They didn't like the smear line, so they started to use ink or ink on Mylar in the old hand drawing days. I actually did Mylar drawings by hand with ink, which is a very challenging sort of thing to do because you can't make mistakes. When you did that, you used a set of pens that had different distinct line weights that were usually in millimeters. And you would pick based on, oh, I'm drawing walls, I'm going to pick the thick line, and I'm going to draw all my walls with the thick line. Then AutoCAD came along. And AutoCAD allows you to set line weights and to draw using line weights really easily. And we then started to use AutoCAD and started to draw in AutoCAD. The problem was, initially, people that drew in AutoCAD didn't take the same time or care with their line weight choices as the people who drafted by hand. So hand drawings had this certain really nice quality to them. They always looked really good. And AutoCAD drawings always kind of look like AutoCAD drawings. It's kind of like SketchUp files always look kind of like SketchUp files because they just kind of do. So AutoCAD always kind of looked like that, and so there was kind of a stigma about using AutoCAD. So when I was an undergrad, way back when, I was actually prohibited. Even though AutoCAD was fairly standard at that point, people knew AutoCAD, it was prohibited in my 100A studio at Berkeley to use AutoCAD. You had to draw by hand. Crazy. Okay? So what I did is I drew in AutoCAD first, and then I printed it out and I traced over it, because it was much faster to do it that way than to draw everything and construct everything by hand. So the point is that it wasn't that long ago that hand drawings were really perceived as this superior art form. And in today's day, we don't have time to draw by hand. It just doesn't exist. So my hope is that you will take a little bit of what I'm talking about today and understand that your line drawings, your really basic line drawings with no collage or anything else out of AutoCAD, can still be really beautiful drawings. You don't have to have really fancy shading or anything. You don't have to have shadows on them. You can just, with your line weights, make a beautiful drawing. And so today we're going to talk about layers and also line weights to a large degree to try to make these drawings shine so that you can see it. On the back of all of your handouts today is the image that you see up on the screen. It's a sample that I did. It's a line weight guide for AutoCAD, just to give you some place to start. And I found over time that people will ask me, well, wait a minute, what should I do my line weight for a wall? What's the typical line weight for this or for that? So I took the floor plan that you guys did last class, or 2 classes ago, the sample floor plan, and I put line weights on it to give you a sense. When I put line weights on a drawing like this, however, it's always a little bit dependent on what printer you print it on. And so it's not a bad idea to run an image like this or run a set of line weights through whatever printer you intend to use, because printers print a little bit differently. Sometimes a gray doesn't really show up on a printer, and in other printers it shows up really nicely. So it's not a bad idea to double check. For our purposes today, this is a pretty good guide for the printers that you have available here at DVC. So we'll reference back to this guide as I go through today as kind of a baseline for my renderings or for my line drawings. You'll notice as we go through on the right side that I indicate certain things. So for example, the first thing is called a roof. It's next to that in brackets. It says 0.18 mm. That's the line thickness in millimeters. So AutoCAD controls line thickness in millimeters. Illustrator controls it in points. So they're different units of measurement, unfortunately. They'll convert over, but for our purposes in AutoCAD, they're going to be in millimeters, which has to do with the thickness of the pen that you used to use when you used to draw with a pen. Okay? So when I say that the roof is 0.18 millimeters, that is the thickness of the line. And then I say BLK next to it, that means it's black. Because when I do line weights, I have a tendency to use grays as well. So if something's a lot lighter, I'll make it a gray shade. So let me come down here. OK. If you look in the second group, you see something called flooring. Next to it, it says it's a hatch. I'll explain what a hatch is a little bit later. The thickness is 0.00 millimeters, which is the thinnest line that AutoCAD makes. 0.00 millimeters. And then I have C:251. That means that in AutoCAD, this is color number 251, which happens to be gray. So when I refer to that C:251, it's referring to a specific color. I'll tell you about that when we get further along today. So we'll come back and we'll reference this as we go back and forth today. But I want to just kind of start by talking through that for you so that you can see it. I guess I should have pointed up here at the 0.18 millimeter. That's the thickness. The BLK is the black. Down here where it says flooring, the 0.00 is the thinnest line that AutoCAD can make. And the C:251 means it's color 251 in AutoCAD. OK, so I'll come back to this. I'll reference this as we go forward. I've gone ahead and I've opened up a floor plan. This is a floor plan of a drawing that roughly suits what you guys were working on in terms of bedrooms, living space, etc. So this is similar. This is the model that I'm going to use as my example. This should somewhat look like what you guys were working on last class. That's the goal. So what I have right now is I have a drawing. I have my floor plan. All of it is on layer 0, and I have the topography lines that run right through my floor plan. There's my little floor plan. There's all the topo lines. So this should all look very familiar so far. We're going to start today by talking about layers and typical layers and assigning objects to particular layers. So one of the tricky things about layers in AutoCAD is that depending on where you work and what firm you work for, they have a specific naming scheme for how they're going to name their layers and how they're going to classify their layers. So if you're working for a particular firm, they're going to tell you, this is how we name our layers in AutoCAD. The reason that they tell you this is because it's very common in a firm for me to be working on a drawing, for Art to be working on the same drawing, and then you give it back to me, and we have to know what's on each layer, and we have to agree. And if we don't agree, that's a problem, because we end up with lots of extra layers. So we have to make sure that we keep that consistency in our firm. For today's purposes, I'm going to roughly base my layers on kind of the industry standard. That doesn't mean that it's going to be universal for every firm that you go to work for. You're going to find that out when you go to work for a firm. Do I really have to name my layers based on industry standard? Absolutely not. And it's very, very common if I'm working in AutoCAD that I just name my layers whatever I feel like naming them. Okay? But if I were going to hand that drawing off to somebody who wasn't me and expect them to work with my drawing, it would be difficult for them to figure out what I meant by east wall, second floor. They might not know that. So we're going to try to use somewhat of a little bit more naming convention. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Layer Properties button right here at the top. And that's going to bring up my Layer Properties Manager. which is this little ribbon. It loves to collapse itself into this little side ribbon when you're not actually working with it. So you might have to click that little double triangle icon to make it stick out to the side again if it happens to collapse. So right now, we're going to ignore the filter section for today. But here we have two layers. We have layer 0, and we have the topography layer. So typically, when we start thinking about an architectural drawing, there's several different people that are going to be working on drawings. There's the architect, or the architectural drawings. There's a civil engineer who's dealing with survey work, etc. There's a structural engineer who's dealing with structural work. There might be an electrical engineer that's working with electrical. There might be somebody who else is doing the utility plan, etc. So we like to separate those general categories out. So we're going to be working today in the architectural realm. So every layer that I create is going to start with an A for architectural. Okay? So let's start by creating a layer for the walls. So I'm going to click on the New Layer button. It's 3 stacks of paper with a little orange star next to it. And when I click on that, it creates a new layer. The default name for this layer is layer 1. I'm going to change that name to A dash, and then this is where I'm going to put in what it is. So in this case, it would be wall. So I'll say this is A dash wall, because this is a layer for walls. As I come across here, we're going to want to make sure that it's on and not frozen. I'll talk about those two in just a second. And that it's unlocked. We come to the color. The color, we want it to be white. Now remember, when we're working in AutoCAD, white and black are reversed. So we're going to say it's white right now, but when it goes to print, it's going to turn black. It's the only color that's reversed. So it's just white. So we're going to leave that set as white. The line type is, do you want it to be a dashed line or a center line or a special line type, or do we want it to just be a continuous normal line? In this case, we want it to be a continuous normal line. Then we get to the next category, which is called line weight. This we're going to actually change. So it's set right now at default. We're going to click where it says defa for default. And we're going to change it to the thickness that I'm suggesting for your walls. And so I have a suggestion for your walls at being 0.40 millimeters in black. So I'm going to come down here to 0.40 millimeters. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to say OK. So now my line weight is set. You can see it's different from the default. It's set at 0.40 millimeters. Transparency, I'm going to leave it at 0, which is solid, but you could adjust that if you want. This is a relatively new thing in AutoCAD. Then we have a few other icons. We have this is a plot style color. Some old school firms used to, or still might, plot based on colors. So line weights are assigned to a specific color. And this is probably too much information for you, but this goes back to the old days of plotters. Before they were giant inkjet printers like we have, a plotter used to be a big machine that had 4 or 5 different pens that were stuck in it. You'd stick your pen in the plotter, you'd tell it to go plot, and the green line on your drawing would correspond to a certain pen that was in the plotter, and it would draw with that pen on your piece of paper. It's like total old school. And then you'd change to like the red line, and it would go pick up the other pen, and it would start drawing with the red pen. That's how plotters used to work. So some firms and some companies still work under that mindset where you assign line weights based on color. AutoCAD has the ability to do this still. So if you still work in that realm, you can assign line weights based on color. It's something you will never ever see in your practice, is my guess. But depending on who you're working for, maybe you'd see it. So at least I'll tell you that. Anyway, so you can safely ignore the plot style, the color 7 in the plot style here. This last little printer icon controls whether it's a printing layer or a non-printing layer. Eventually today I'll create a non-printing layer and I'll show you why it's useful a little bit later on. But for right now we want it to be printing. So I've created the A wall layer. It's on. Now I need to put some objects on that A wall layer. So let me close the Layer Properties Manager here. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to select my walls. And this takes a little bit of time, depending on how you drew it, to go through and select your walls. So as I'm coming through and I'm selecting my walls, Right, I'm working my way around. Now we get to windows. So I have a series of fixed pane windows here above the kitchen. These lines that divide the windows, because of where we're cutting the floor plan, which is 4 feet above the ground, when we cut that floor plan, we're cutting through the windows. Therefore, we're going to include these on the wall layer. Even though technically they're windows, these dividing lines here are going to be on the wall layer. So I'm going to click from right to left and drag through all of those little lines. And I'm going to keep working my way around my drawing. So those count, not the windows. In between the doors, there and there, obviously count. I'll keep working my way around. Now, if you were drawing, or I guess I should say if I were drawing from scratch in AutoCAD, typically I'd set up my layers first, so that as I was drawing, if I was drawing walls, I'd switch to the walls layer and draw the walls. For your purposes, yesterday or on Monday, you didn't actually draw that way. You just put everything on one layer, which means we have to go through and change those layers. Bear with me, I'm almost there. If you accidentally selected something, so like if I did this where I accidentally selected that line, if you hold down the Shift key and drag over it again, or click over it again, it'll deselect that particular piece. That, for those of you that are in 136, that's different. In Rhino, it's Control to deselect. In AutoCAD, it's Shift to deselect. All right, almost there. OK, so now I have all of the walls selected. You can see them kind of highlighted in that blue color. All I have to do to change the layer is to go up to my layers here. Oh, looks like I accidentally selected this piece of topography. Let me deselect that. There we go. I go up to my layers, and instead of the layer 0, when I click, I'm going to move down to the A-wall layer. All of those lines are now on the A wall layer. If I want to confirm that, or if I want visual representation of that, sometimes it's useful to go ahead and change the color. So I could take the A wall layer and temporarily change it to be red. So I just changed the color to red. And now I can visually look at this and say, oh yeah, I did get all of the walls. I didn't miss anything. Those are all on the wall layer right now. Yeah?
Changing the color in that category and not at the end doesn't affect when you print it out, though?
So right now, these lines would print red because I've changed the color to red. So before I print, I'm going to have to go back and change them back to white.
Unless you do like a monochrome.
Yes, you could theoretically do a monochrome line table, and it would work. I generally don't do that, but you could if you wanted to. OK, so now I have all my walls set up as red. I've confirmed, because they're red, that they're on the correct layer. That's good. I'm happy that they're on their correct layer. And we'll keep working with those. But remember, I assigned that layer a thickness. All these lines should have a thickness to them. And they're not showing right now. And they should be. So the reason they're not showing is because my line weights are not currently turned on. Furthermore, down here at the bottom where I have all my little toggles, the line weights icon isn't even showing. Why AutoCAD hides this by default, I have no idea. Anyway, we're going to take a look for it. So I'm going to click on the little 3 parallel lines at the bottom right corner. And as I come down here, there should be a checkbox for line weight. I'll turn on line weights so that I can see the tool. So now that it's checked, it's showing up. And it shows up right here. It's right next to the object snap. And it looks like several parallel lines with some thickness to them right there. When I click on that, it should make all of my lines thick. This is not how the drawing actually turns out. This is a display version. So sometimes these lines look thicker than they'll actually print. Furthermore, lines that are below about 0.2 or 0.25 millimeters all look the same on the display screen. There is the ability, if you right-click on this tool, to go into line weight settings and to change the display scale so you can make things thicker or thinner. I generally don't mess with this, but it's available to you if you wanted to. Looks like I missed a little bit, so these lines right there should have been on the walls layer. So I'll switch them to the walls layer. So now I have all the walls on their own layer. I'm going to go back to my layer properties, and I'm going to turn them back to white. So I'll click on it. Now, I want you to be really careful when you switch back to white. There looks like there's two different whites available. On the top row here, under index colors, right here, index color 7 is white. Below that, we have a series of grayscales, and it looks like there's white at the end, which is color 255. Color 255 is actually white and will print in white. You don't want that. So instead, make sure you pick this one, which is index color 7. This is the white that converts to black. So make sure in that top row when you pick it. So there we go. I'm back to index color 7. I'll say OK. My line weights turn back to white. That all looks good. So now I'm going to, for ease of working with this drawing, I'm going to eventually turn off the wall layer so that I can see what pieces of the drawing I have left, i.e. I have windows left and doors left, and it'll make it easier to work with those pieces of the drawing. I have two options built into AutoCAD. There's a layer on and off light bulb that turns the layer on and off, and there's also a layer freeze. There's a sun. When I click on the sun, for example, it turns to a little snowflake. So AutoCAD has two different ways of turning off a layer. And this is an old school like AutoCAD thing. And there's a subtle difference between the two in terms of what they do. When you turn a layer on and off using the light bulb, it doesn't remove the layer's information from the computer's memory. It keeps it ready. If you freeze the layer and you turn it into the little snowflake, it removes it from the system's memory. When we had computers that were very small, with not a lot of RAM in them, with very low processing power, this mattered. Now it makes absolutely no difference which one you pick. So you're safe to do either one. Because I learned AutoCAD way back when computers were really low powered, I think it was a Pentium 2 or something like that, when they were that low powered, it mattered. In which case, freezing and thawing was always a good strategy because you remove stuff from the system processing, gave yourself a little bit more power. So I'm still in the habit of freezing and thawing my layers, which is why I will turn them on and off by freezing and thawing them instead of picking the on and off button. For your purposes, you can use either one, and it's not gonna affect you at all. Yeah.
I heard this when you do the freeze, you export a file like to go to color. When you freeze, it won't go. It won't write to the file.
When you write it to what?
If you like get the file to the laser cutter.
Oh.
When that layer is freeze, it won't go to that file, the WG file goes to the laser cutter, I think.
I don't know. I'll have to take a look and double check. Anyway, so I'm going to right now freeze the A-wall layer. So I'll click on the little sun icon and I'll freeze it, and that means my walls will all basically turn off for now. Before I move away from my layers manager here, my layer properties manager, I'm going to create a new layer. So once again, I'll go back to my new layer, little star here. And this is going to be the A-window layer. This layer I want to be on, so I'll make sure that it's unfrozen. And I'll come across, I still want it to be white. I want the line type to be continuous, but the line weight, I don't want it to be 0.4. Instead, I want it to be 0.00 in black. So I'll go to 0.00, and I'll go ahead and say OK. So this line is 0.00. It's in white. All the rest of this is OK. I'll close my Layer Properties Manager, and now I'm going to go in and select all of the windows. So there's some windows. And you can see how it's a lot easier to select these. Those are actually doors. It's a lot easier to select these windows when I have everything else turned off. When I have all the walls turned off, it makes it nice and easy to select these. There we go. Those are doors. These are windows. OK, so all of those are windows. I'm going to change them onto the Windows layer. So I'll come up to my layers. I'll go to this little drop-down menu and change to A-window. And they'll all change over to the A-window layer. I'm going to go back to my layer properties. I'm going to freeze the A window. Those are now off. And I'm going to move on to the A door. So I'll create a new layer. It'll be A-door. I want it to be unfrozen. And my line weight here, I'm going to do it at 0.18. And I'll go ahead and say OK. Now, on the little handout on the back here, on this, I have the door swing as a thinner line than the door itself. If you want to have separate layers for the door and the door swing, you can. The truth is, this looks great to have the door swing a little bit lighter than the door. It's a lot of work to keep track of that. So if you want to just make everything 0.18, that's fine too. So for our purposes today, I'm going to leave it all at 0.18. There we go. So I have a door. It's on. It's white. It's a continuous line, and it's 0.18 in thickness. I'm going to go ahead and close my Layer Properties Manager, and I'll go through and select my doors. So there's a door. There's a door. There's a door. Now I had some closet doors. There's 2 closet doors. Right here I had a couple sliding glass doors. We'll select those. And there's one more door right there. So I've selected all of these as my doors. It's time to put them on the doors layer. So I'll go to A-door. They'll all be on the door layer. And now I can go back to my layer properties and I can turn off the door layer. So as I start to look at this, at what's left, there's a lot of things that are just kind of leftovers. So for example, I have a kitchen sink and I have some counters that are in here that are available. I need to put those on some kind of a layer, and I need to think about what I want that layer to be called. So typically, we have 2 more layers that are commonly used in practice, A-fern for furniture and A-fixtures for fixtures. Technically speaking, the sink is kind of a fixture. The toilet or tub would be fixtures, something like that. Cabinets could be furniture, could be fixtures. For me, for consistency purposes, I think I'll put them all on the fixtures layer. So I'm going to go into my layer properties, and I'm going to add a new layer. And this is going to be A-fixture, or fixtures. And here, I'm going to change my line weight. We'll do let's do a 0.09. 0.09. Double checking here. Yeah, and I'll go ahead and say OK. There they are at 0.09. I'll close my Layer Properties Manager. I'll select the kitchen cabinets, and we'll put those on the fixtures layer. So now they're there. I have a few extra lines, and we're going to come to what those end up being a little bit later on. So I've got the fixtures. Let me turn everything back on. So I can go through and unfreeze all of these pieces of my drawing, and now we're starting to look at it. So remember before I told you that you wouldn't see the thinner line weights. So I have a 0.09 for my doors, but they're not showing up here. They just look like 0.00 lines. If I were to go ahead and print this, however, then I would be able to see it. So let me go through that. You don't have to do it yet. You're going to print at the end today, but I'm going to do this as an illustration for what we're doing. I'm going to go into print. We're going to plot a single sheet, and I'm going to make it a JPEG. So publish to web JPEG, default paper size, and I'm going to plot a window around my drawing here. There it is. Now, under the plot pen style table, because we have line weights assigned now, we have to have something listed here. So instead of none, it should read just the basic acad.ctb. And I'll remind you of this as we go forward. So I've changed my plot style table. If you're not seeing that little drawer, if all you see is this, most of the time you see it by default. There's a little right arrow that will bring that out so that you can see it. I'm going to go ahead and say OK at this point. And I'm going to choose where to put it. Let me put it in today's folder. And I'm going to number these so that we can see them as they progress. So I've gone ahead and I've printed it. Let me open it up in Photoshop so we can see it. There it is. If I press Control 0, let me zoom in a little bit more so you can start to see it. So we can see here the quality's not that great, but we can see that some of the lines are thicker than other lines, which is good. That's what we're looking for. These are probably showing up as thick blocks because the lines are too dense and the quality is not high enough. We'll correct that as we go forward. Let me press Control 0 to see it. And you can already tell that the plan is leaping out a little bit more than the doors. The line weights for the walls are sticking out. So I can read that a little bit. Let's continue making this a little bit better. So the next piece of this puzzle is bringing in things like furniture and appliances and what have you. We have the ability in AutoCAD to use their Design 360, I think it's called, where they have a bunch of Suites catalog stuff that's built in. Unfortunately, you have to have an account set up with Autodesk, and it's kind of a pain to set up. I'm not going to ask you to do that today. Instead, I'm suggesting that you go to another website and search for AutoCAD Blocks. You can do a Google search for it, or firstinarchitecture.com has a great collection of blocks available for free, which is good. So here it is, First in Architecture. If we come down here to CAD blocks, these are all of their CAD blocks. If you wanted, for example, a CAD block of a shipping container that had all the dimensions and details of a shipping container, you could get that. That's not particularly useful, nor are the park signs or the play equipment or the fountains. But as we keep scrolling down here, we will get to the point where we have some decent looking stuff. So free CAD blocks, here's chairs. Well, that could be useful. We don't really need trees right now. Furniture, sofas and couches. Okay, that looks like a good one. Let's find that. So I'm going to click on the title of this, and we can see kind of a preview of all these various things that are included as part of this block. So what an AutoCAD block is it's a file that someone else has drawn or that you've drawn with the intent of being able to use it over and over and over again. And so we're going to download these files and be able to insert them in to our drawing without having to actually draw them ourselves. So you could, obviously, draw your own couch. But it takes time to draw your own couch and to figure out what the dimensions are and to insert it into your drawing, etc. So we're going to try to save ourselves a little bit of time by doing it. So this is the free furniture blocks. Let's see where the download is. Here it is. I have two choices. I can download now in metric, or I can download now in imperial. I'm working in feet and inches, therefore I want the imperial version. I'll click on it, and I'll download the zip file. When it's done, let me go ahead and show it in its folder. It's a zip file. Inside the zip file, we have a file that says Blocks Furniture 08. It's an AutoCAD file. What I would suggest doing is taking that file and copying it to a folder on your flash drive that would be in your resources folder if you have one. I have this. For those of you in 136, you know I'm very familiar with going into V-Ray and going to my materials and all that kind of stuff. I have a folder for AutoCAD as well. Inside my AutoCAD folder, I have several other folders. Many of these are things that I use on a regular basis. That's why they're here. One of the folders, however, is called Blocks. If I double click on Blocks, I have a bunch of blocks that I've used in the past. I even have a folder that are my blocks, ones that I've created, and I'll show you that in a little bit as I bring it in. The Furniture 08 Imperial, right there, I've already copied it over into this folder, so it's ready for me to use. So at this point, I need to figure out how to bring it into my AutoCAD drawing. So let me go back to my AutoCAD drawing that I was working on here. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my layer properties, and I'm going to add one more layer. This one, when I click on the New Layer button, I'm going to call A-Furn. You could say furniture, but for whatever reason, I can never spell furniture correctly, so I just say A-Furn. Makes it easier. So this furniture layer, once again, I have to assign a line weight for it. I don't actually have any furniture on this sheet for any line weight reference, but I'm going to do it at 0.00. So it's nice and thin, and I'll go ahead and say OK. I'm going to leave it as white, and I'm also going to make it the current layer, the layer that I'm drawing on. So over here on the left side, I'm going to double click, and the little green check mark is going to go next to the A-Fern layer. I'll go ahead and close the Layer Properties Manager at this point. And without anything selected up here at the top, it should say A-Fern. OK, so now we're ready to bring in the blocks in the first place. Couple caveats to bringing in blocks. If you didn't create it and you didn't know who created it, there always can be issues when you bring something in. So number one issue, the scale's off. That happens frequently. Depends on who drew it and whether they did it to correct scale. So that could be a problem. Number two, the layers could be really weird. That's another thing that you might have to fix. Number three, they could be really complex and slow down your computer. It depends on who drew them and what they look like. So those three things can happen. We're going to find out. Mostly the first in architecture ones work seamlessly. I haven't had too many problems with those. So let's go ahead and bring that in. So at the ribbon at the top here, I have Home. Next to it, I have Insert. If I click on Insert, the first little category here is Blocks. And you can see Block at the bottom. There's a button on the left called Insert. I'm going to click on that button and say Insert Block. It's going to ask me, using this little Insert dialog box, for the name or file. I'm going to go ahead and click on Browse, and I'm going to go find that First in Architecture Imperial 08 block. I'll go ahead and say Open. And from here, when I say OK, it's going to ask me where to put the blocks. So at this point, I'm just going to click somewhere on the page, and the blocks are going to show up. I can take this now, and I could explode the block, and I can start using it. But to me, that's not what we should be doing with blocks. So believe it or not, after I insert it, I'm going to just delete it. So I have it selected, and I'll press the Delete key. By bringing them in, however, under the blocks here, if I click where it says Block, oh, of course not. Really? Oh, there we go. When I click on Insert again, you can see all the blocks that were included in that piece that I brought in as individual little items. This makes it much easier to select and bring them in. So let's say that I like this Sofa Arrangement 10 right here. If I click on it, it'll load up on my mouse, and I can then drop that Sofa Arrangement 10 right there into my room. If I went back up here to Insert, I could pick something different. Let's say that I wanted, you know what, I really liked this arrangement better. There, that would be loaded up, and I could put that in place instead. I'm going to hit Escape because I'm going to use this one. This block, when I select it, it's all like a grouped object. That's because it's a block. If I go back to the Home ribbon, we can see that it did show up on the furniture layer because that was my current layer. That's a good sign. It should have all of the line weights assigned by layer. It all should be 0.00. So let's go ahead and double check that when I print it. So let me go to Print. And this time, under the page setup, I'm going to use the previous plot. So it's exactly the same as the last one. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And again, you're not creating versions today. You're going to do one print at the end. I'm just doing this to show you guys what it looks like. And let me go ahead and open up the second one. Okay, it looks the same, but this time I have a nice thin little couch that's been brought in. So maybe it's time to bring in some beds for the bedrooms. So I'm going to go ahead and once again go to the Insert tab here. I'm going to click on Insert. And this time it's not listed. I don't have the ability to choose a new block. If I click on More Options, it'll bring up the Insert dialog box again. I can click on Browse. And this time I'm going to bring in one of my own. You guys could spend more time on the First in Architecture block, and you should be able to see, I think they have beds and whatever. I'm going to use one of mine that I've actually created. it's a block for a bed. I'll go ahead and say open. I'll say OK, and I'll drop it in. Just like I did with the first in architecture block, I'll then select it and delete it. Now, under the Insert button, if I keep looking, I have a couple different beds that were available to me. I'm going to insert this casual bed instead. There it is. I drew this one myself, and I made it look a little fluffier than a bed. But I wanted to point out something else, and that is that when I created it, I put another set of options in it. So here's my bed. There's this little triangle. If I click on that, I have several different styles of bed to work from. I have a standard twin, double, queen, and king. I also have the casual queen. That's what this size is. And this one was based on a Restoration Hardware sleigh bed, so it adds some front and back to it. I can then go through and I can change the bed size to be whatever size it is that I wanted it to be. There's the king, for example. So now that I have that, I can start to put this into my rooms. So let's take the king bed here, and let's drop this one. Let me turn off ortho here for a second. Into this room. I need to rotate it, so I'll use the rotate command. Let me go back to my home ribbon. I'll use rotate. I'm going to rotate around the center of the bed. And if I turn back on my ortho, there it is. And I could then move this up closer to the wall. And I could ultimately center it in that room. I could also throw in another bed. I could go back to Insert. This time I want a twin bed. And we can put that in here. I'll go back to the home ribbon. I'll rotate. There it is. And I'm going to use move. And this room's going to have two beds in it. So I just copied it to create two beds. So I was able to put the basic furniture in and get that ready. So those all came in as blocks. Now that I have those in, and you guys can search for more blocks, there's usually appliances, there's stoves and refrigerators and all those kinds of things that you can choose to put in as well. There's also toilets that you could put in. Some manufacturers have files that you can use. So for example, Kohler is a big bathroom manufacturer. If you went to the Kohler website, and we went into kitchen and bath, let's go into bathroom here. Let's go into toilets. Nobody actually wants to draw a toilet, right? So we could then pick, oh, you know what, I like, oh, sure, let's go two-piece toilet. That's good. Okay, I like this toilet. I'm picking this completely at random here. As we scroll down here, right here, there's a CAD file, there's a DWG file. I can download that DWG, and it'll actually have this drawing that I can bring in as a block. So a lot of manufacturers have this information available for you as well. So if you're looking for something specific, you want a specific bathtub or whatever, you could go to one of these manufacturers, find the file, and bring it in. Okay. So now that I've created the bases, I'm going to keep working to enhance this drawing a little bit more. So we've brought in blocks. The next piece is something called a hatch. And in AutoCAD, sometimes you want to fill in a region with a particular cross hatch or set of lines that are all parallel to each other or a certain pattern. The simplest, easiest hatch is just a solid hatch. So let's say, for example, that I really wanted this to show up a little bit darker, even than the drawing here, and I wanted to fill in all of the walls as black. I could do that using what's called a hatch. And so in AutoCAD, I encourage you to put the hatches on their own layer. Not all firms do this. Sometimes they do it differently. So this is more me personally sharing something versus an industry standard. But in my layers menu, I would create a new layer. I'll call this A-hatch. Sometimes I go a step further and say A-hatch wall or something like that. And in this case, we're going to leave it white we're going to leave the line thickness at 0.00. I'm going to make it the current layer, so I'll double click on A-hatch, so it has the green check mark next to it. I'll close the Layer Properties Manager, and I'm going to use the tool Hatch. And we can pick on the Hatch button, which is available under the basic draw tools. It's right here. Or you can type in Hatch. And when I click on that, I have a couple different options here at the top ribbon. First thing is Pick Points. This Pick Points button basically says, where do you want your hatch to go? And so if I wanted to put my hatch in this wall, as I move over this wall, you see it fills it in and kind of color codes it. Let's see here. Oh, come on. There it is. And you can kind of see that it's filling it in. For our purposes, the next category here is the pattern. There's a lot of hatch patterns available. You can see there's brick. Some of these are meant for sections. You're cutting through dirt. There's an earth hatch pattern that you would use to represent what you've cut through. Let me see if I can find it. There it is, as earth. So some of these are meant for those purposes. When you're doing a section and you're gonna show what a particular material is, sure. Some of them are meant for elevations, like I have a shingles, for example. I have bricks. Those I could use as my elevations on my elevation views. For our purposes right now, I'm going to pick solid. I just want a color. So I'll pick on solid. And now I'm going to go to Pick Points. And so all I have to do is pick inside the walls, I hope. There we go. And as I do that, it's going to fill in these regions. So I need to pick in there. I need to pick in there. I need to pick in there. Sometimes, as you zoom in, though, it won't want to do it. So there it is. There it is. I need that piece there. I need that one. That one. That one. That right there. You'll also notice that sometimes it fills in regions that you don't want. Just make sure you don't click in one of those regions. We'll fill that in. There. Yes. Which windows are you asking about? These ones at the bottom? Those are designed to be like full height. So kind of like these. Yes. Yes. So they have a little mullion in between them, dividing them, that go up and down, but they're designed to be full height windows. That's what I was drawing in there. That being said, actually this rear line should probably go away. Because of how the floor, they were meant to go all the way down to the floor. But that's more of a technicality. Go ahead and draw this in right there, and a couple more there, there, there. Every once in a while you get this. That means you clicked on an object instead of on a region. Two more there and there. When I hit enter, my hatch is now done, and I've filled in all of those walls. If you miss something, you can go back and hatch again. If I were to print this, again, I'm using previous plot so that they're all exactly the same. Click Save. That's going to read very different as a floor plan. So it's much more stark. This works. Oh, and you can see I missed something right there, so I'd have to go back and fix that. This reads a lot more stark. A lot of textbooks use this style floor plan, so you'll see these black lines. It's really easy to see where the walls are in something like this. This can be a little strong in your graphic presentation. It can draw a little bit too much attention. So the option to that would be to change your color away from being black and instead making that color, this is why it's on its own layer, I can go back to my layer properties, and right here under hatch, I can change from white to I'm going to pick one of the grays. And so I can do 250, 251, 252. I'm going to try 252 and see how it turns out as a gray. I'll say OK, and now you can see that the wall fill is gray instead of black, and I could go ahead and print that. Same thing with the with the previous plot. There it is, and we can open this one back up. And so it's still filling in the walls, it's letting me read them as walls, but it's not quite so overpowering as the black example. And you can see how they're different. So this is a personal preference. It's what feels right to you in terms of creating this. So now I have those filled in. Now, a couple other things. One, this line, this topo line really needs to go away because the topo line shouldn't be going through my building. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that. So I'm going to use the trim command. And when it asks me to select objects, I'm just going to say all. Makes it easier. And I'll hit enter, and then I'm going to come in here and clip it right there. And at the other end, I'll clip it right. Nope, not my hatch, sorry. No. There it is. OK, now that I'm done, I'll hit enter. I can select that line, and I can actually delete it so that it's not going through my building anymore. Probably should have done that earlier. OK, so that line's gone. I've filled in those. Now maybe I want to put some hatch or some parallel lines that represent a floor. So for example, on the little handout here, I have tiles on the floor in one place, and I have kind of a wood grain pattern on the floor. I can do the same thing here. I can use the hatch command to do it, so I'll click on the hatch button. And instead, on my pattern, I'm going to start with just a set of horizontal lines. They're going at 45 degrees, but I'll correct that problem as we go forward. So I'll click this ANSI 31. And when I go to click on it, you see that it's filling in a bunch of my floor. Furthermore, it's going inside the doors in places, and I might not want that to happen. So to fix that, I need to make sure that I'm working with closed regions. So the problem down here where it's going inside the cabinets is because I don't have a line at the end. So before I can do the hatch, I need to put a line that comes down to close that. Remember, this line shouldn't be on the hatch layer. It should be on the furniture layer. So let me go back to the, fixtures, so that it's on its correct layer. Looks like I need one more line right there to go on the fixtures layer. There we go. And now I can come back and do that hatch again. I was also having some trouble with the block. And this is one of those issues, depending on who drew the block, as to how well they cover each other. So let me go ahead and try that one again. I'll go back to hatch. And I'll pick my pattern here. And when I go to pick this internal point, all right, it filled it in pretty well. Now, currently, if I zoom in on it, at some point I'll probably see the lines. I'm not seeing them yet. So I need to change the scale of the lines here. So I'm looking at my properties, and I'm going to change, number one, the scale. So let's go up. Let's try 10. 10.0. OK, now I'm starting to see my horizontal lines. That's good. Let's try 20. OK, better. Let's try 30. OK, those are starting to look like flooring, pieces of flooring. Maybe we go up a little bit higher. Let's try 40. OK, that feels a little bit better. And you can see how it's filling in all of that. Now, I don't want it to be set at that 45 degrees. I want to change it. That's where the angle comes in. So if I change this by 45 degrees, all of that hatch is now going vertically. So that's pretty good. When I'm done, I'll go ahead and hit enter to finish. And there it is. So I have my hatch. It went around my furniture. That's good. It filled in there. I've got some problems, though. It went into the bathroom. I don't want it to go there. So here's where I can draw a line that goes from there to there, right at the center of the door. And in this case, this line, I don't want it to print. So I'm going to go up to my layer properties, and I'm going to create another layer. So right here, we'll create a new layer. And I call this layer no print. And you'll see as we go forward in the class that I'm going to use a no print layer a fair amount. And for me personally, I always make my no print layer green. I have no idea why, but it's just visually I know that one's not going to print. So I always make it no print green. At the very end here, where the little printer icon is, I click on it, I get a little red slash, meaning it's not going to print. That's a good sign. I'll close the Layer Properties Manager. I'll make this line on the no print layer. And I'll draw a line. Let's see, I've got the same issue from there to there. And that needs to go on the no print layer. And the same issue from there to there. And that needs to go on the no print layer. So at this point, I can do the hatch again, or I can use the trim command. So let me go back to trim. Once again, I'll say all, and I can trim off that part of my hatch. I can trim off that part of my hatch, and I can trim off that part of my hatch. So I'm just cleaning it up a little bit. So I have my wood flooring all in there. Maybe I want tile flooring out here. I can go back to my hatch. And this time under pattern, I might pick something that looks more like tile. And I want it to go inside there, and inside there, and inside there. Looks like my scale doesn't work anymore. Let's go back to maybe 10. Oh, still way too large. Let's go back to 1. It's maybe 2. Too big, 1.5. That's about right for my floor tile pattern. But once again, I want it to go back to 0 there so that it's horizontal. And now I have that pattern outside. So I'm just using this to fill in the floor a little bit. I still have it very light, so it's not dominating my drawing. These are all very thin as well. The hatch layer is set at 0.00. So let me go ahead and do another print to show you what it looks like. So I'll go back into print. I'll do previous plot. Say OK. And this is now version 5. And so now you can see that I've added in that little bit of floor texture. They're nice and thin, and I know this image quality isn't that high, but it's now showing up with nice thin lines that are this lightish gray. So what I've done is I've taken and I've gone from the very basic floor plan and worked to enhance it into something that feels like a lot more graphical about this is what the floor plan is. We will talk going forward about layouts and text and all the rest of the things that you'll add. Today I want you to focus on making your floor plan look really good. So you should have your floor plan done. Now it's about making it look good, getting your layers set up. We've walked through layers, blocks, hatches, and line weights. When you're done, you're going to do the same publish to web JPEG to get this end result out as your post today. Are there any questions? No? No? You look like maybe. OK.